D.C. area. UCA, Bethesda. I went to school in the district, and then I went to public school later on at PCC High School. And that was at Bethesda. And I'm a Maryland boy.
What were your early musical memories?
The first memories I had musically were Elvis Presley when I was real little, and the Platters and people like that. People that were playing around that time. That was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And my first records that were given to me by my aunt Catherine, and my cousin Kathy had given me some early Elvis records. Well, not the Sun stuff, but the RCAs. And some of them were EPs like Teddy Bear, and it would be All Shook Up, and I guess it was like a few other ones. Those little EPs they used to have. And I used to climb up in a willow tree in our front yard, and I used to sing All Shook Up and Hound Dog and stuff. That's my first memories. And seeing Elvis on TV, and things like those would be my musical references. And seeing other shows that were on that had music and stuff at that time. And Lake Ray on Milk Ranch show, which was every Saturday, and it was cool. And the Glen Echo Amusement Park was really a neat place because you could hear bands playing live. And I remember I was amazed how they sounded with the big ballroom, and some of these guys probably had some sort of echo plexes or reverb units.
Sure.
Big sound. It was great.
First guitar.
My first guitar was when I heard the Beatles. And then I heard the Stones. I guess it was the Beatles first, and I asked my dad if he could buy me a guitar. So we went to a pawn shop, I believe, and I got the first guitar I got I was sent to the Bethesda Guitar Center. And my mom and dad said, if you're going to play guitar, you've got to learn to play like for real, in other words, reading tablature and taking real lessons. So I ended up getting this woman who was probably a really great guitar player, and she was trying to teach me Bach, a classical guitar, but I couldn't read tablature. It was later found out as I got older that I was dyslexic. And
sure.
I had a real tough time with it, and she thought maybe I was being lazy, and I just said to her, I can't understand what this stuff was. It's like looking at another language. And she said, well, what do you like to play? And I remember saying, well, I like Slim Harpo, because by that time I'd been listening to the Stones, and I heard Jimmy Reed, and from the Backley record, and I went out and bought those records with my friends in 63, 64. So I had a reference point, and she said, well, I've never heard of those guys. And I kind of knew that it wasn't going to work out. So my dad and I went to a pawn shop in Virginia, and they had I guess it was called like a Segovia guitar. It was a Japanese thing. And I asked my dad, I said, can I get the one up there that has the most pickups on it? Because I'd seen the Beach Boys guitars, and they always had really cool rigs. They had Jaguars, Carl Wilson, and I saw that Carl Wilson playing a Jag, and I saw Al Jardine playing a Strat, and I said, I want something that looks like that with a lot of pickups. So anyway, we got one that came in a plastic bag, clear plastic. I think my dad and I bought a case later for it, but it literally came in a plastic see-through bag. Took it home. I got a little amp that was like that big at the same time, package deal, little tube amp, and that was my first guitar. In fact, one of our teachers was a jazz pianist. So these were pretty hip teachers. I was lucky that I got to go to basically a parochial boys' school. It's called McLean School for Boys. But we had a bunch of us would go to concerts, and they would actually, one of our teachers would let us out and go see. We saw Otis Redding and the whole Sax Volt Review right as Otis Blue had come out, that album. And I remember we went down there, but I remember we went there even before that, and they would let us out for the 3 o'clock matinee, and whatever it was, a few dollars and stuff. So there would be about 5 or 6, and we'd get out of the show, hearing Otis. We'd hear the Stax guys, Cropper was playing with him then, and Duck Down. We go to Waxy Maxey's across the street, and they had a binge of blues records, and we went, hey, these are the guys on the back of these Stones records, and And we just saw Otis, so it was like, you know, so I covered Otis tunes as well as Jimmy Reed, Muddy Waters, and I remember I bought the Best of Muddy in 64, I guess it was. Whatever it came out, 64, 65, and we kept buying singles. We would get Jimmy Reed's latest single, Slim Harpo, Scratch My Back.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And those were my real treasured blues records after I had heard the Stones, you know.
Sure.
But I could play that stuff. I really actually learned how to go, you know, and it was really a great feeling because I could not have done Beatles songs. I couldn't figure them out. And I heard these. When I heard Jimmy Reed, I said, I kind of understand that a little bit, and I think I can pull that off.
Right.
And I realized that then he went up to this, you know. At first, I didn't even know sometimes the names of the chords or keys. I knew this was an E. And I had been in a couple of bands by that point where some guys had said, well, Bobby, this thing here is a D chord, you know. And I was in bands for a little while. I literally didn't know how to do chords, and I didn't know the names for them.
Yeah,
and the guy would go, well, this is a G, Bobby. You know, this is a C. And that was an F. And we made our A's like that back then instead of, you know, the traditional like that. But,
sure.
So, you know, and then I learned sevenths, right? And as I went along, a friend of mine, Frank Radis, had showed me how to make a ninth chord. Frank was a really great guitar player. He was in a band called The Showman, and he was in with maybe the Young Senator. It was Phil Flowers, actually. The Phil Flowers big soul review band. You know, they were playing at this place called the Hayloft in the Rands. And, so we had some great guitar players around at that time too, who were a little older than me and my buddies. You know, and in particular, as I got older, I was going to record stores on my own by that point. I would go to Empire Music, and there was a real slick cat with a really great pompadour. He was a cool guy, and he would talk about, you know, how he just got the Albert Collins, the cool sound of Albert Collins when it came out. This was 1966, I believe, and I remember he told us how to put a shim underneath a Telecaster. By that time, I had a Tele. I'd worked my way up from a Segovia. My first real Fender was a Jazzmaster.
Oh,
and after
sure.
I had the Jazzmaster, I ended up getting I think I had a Tele for a while, and I wanted it to look like Don Rich and Buck Owens Teles, you know, because they had the binding like a Les Paul, like that. And they were, you know, so I went out and painted it by hand. You know, I used to make models, and I painted my own binding on this thing. I think I had spray painted it red before that. I don't know what I did, but all I remember was doing that. This was before Hee Haw. And I thought Don Rich was an amazing player, and Porter Wagner always said great players with his band. I think his son's Carlisle, maybe.
He had the TV show too, right?
Like that. Porter. Yeah, the Porter Wagner show was great. I was in a band called the Yarbs around '65. It was the first really together group I was playing with, and Chris Pestalozzi, Jerry Rivera, and Jim Boyles. And we had a really nice little basement band, and we got to play churches and stuff. And
what were some of the songs in your set?
Well, you know, we mixed it up. We would do a couple of tunes that I love, which I always, one of my favorite bands from that period. We used to try to do some Doors stuff. And then we would play Slim Harpo stuff, like Scratch My Back, and I think Chris would play a little harp. Sometimes maybe I'd blow a little bit. I had a couple of Marine bands, you know. I tried to sound like Louis Myers, and I had my little Walter records by then, so I tried to approximate it. We would split the chores with that, if I remember correctly. But Chris was the leader of the group, Chris Pestalozzi. But we did a real nice spectrum of stuff. We would do some country stuff. We would even do some Byrds tunes. Chris also wrote a lot of stuff. So we were originally called the Yarbs. And when we got really psychedelic, we changed it to Froggy Little. And around that same time, I was starting to kind of really get into my blues head, you know, and I was getting into more public high school, and I got exposed to more broader, a bunch more kids and things, and I wanted to be a Chicago-style player.